Right now is Dr. Fadi Ismail, former senior staffer for U.S. Congress and research fellow at the International Institute for Counterterrorism, along with Dr. Eytan Cohen, Yanarocak, Turkey expert for the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. Thank you both so much for joining me. Dr. Ismail, I want to start with you. As we just heard from our correspondents, both in southern Israel and northern Israel, we're preparing for a war on all fronts. But now we kind of see the operational tactics that Hamas has. Hezbollah is an even greater threat. Hezbollah is a real army. Can you talk to us a little bit about the training that we have? We know they even have fighting experience from Syria as well.
Well, actually, people talk about Hezbollah, and I'm thinking about the 100,000 troops that Iran commands in Syria. Tens of thousands already not very far from the Israeli border in the Golan Heights. While we're looking at Hezbollah, they're sitting there amassing there. And these are all, the whole area between Lebanon all the way to northern Iraq. There are many, many fighters who have been fighting, have been doing nothing actually other than fighting for the last 10 years, if not even a little more. And they're mostly from Lebanon, Syria, and northern Iraq. They are ready. They are there. They are coming towards the borders. I've just heard a statement by a commander of Al-Wa'd al-Sadiq, which is one faction of the Iraqi resistance. He says that he's already have 5,000 soldiers at the borders here and that 10,000 more on the way. So let's pay attention to that border. And it is not something that, there's no military secret here. I mean, it's a known fact. And while we're thinking about the Radwan force, who is in the western part of the Israeli-Lebanese border, and such famous entities, there are also others that are ready. So as far as the kind of training they have, I'm more interested in the kind of experience they have. You can train people, but nothing is as important as experience. And if you have people who have been hardened by battle, and these are people who have been fighting for years, they can cause a lot of trouble, and they will if activated. Now, here's the question. Are they going to be activated? Would Iran spend all this money and effort and make them reach all the way to the borders with Israel and do nothing? Especially that, can Iran appear as somebody who abandons Hamas? I mean, if they do that, they would have a problem, because their entire philosophy for the last 4 decades was, we are building an axis of resistance against the West, against Israel, that was their whole shtick is this. And based upon this shtick, they have been oppressing their own population, spending hundreds of billions of dollars all over the Middle East, in wars, in taking over other countries. I'm not, from a politically speaking, if I'm trying to get into the heads of the leadership of Tehran, how could they not? And there's another interesting thing is that almost all of these fighters are Arabs. They're not Persians. And this is part of their sort of brilliance. They're using Arabs to fight the wars. Although there's a historical enmity between Arabs and Persians. It has been there.
Are they Shiites?
The fighters?
Yes.
Most of them, but not all. But there are also Sunnis, Hamas. Mm-hmm. And there are others.
The ones in Syria, are they Shiites?
Both, they are Alawites, some Shiites. Mm-hmm. There aren't very many Shiites in Syria.
There's a sectarian connection.
Exactly. They managed to build it under this umbrella of The thing is that anti-Israel unifies the entire Muslim world.
Well, and actually going off of that point, I think that brings in exactly what you have to say about everything that we're seeing in Turkey right now, and how this anti-Israel rhetoric is absolutely brewing in Turkey.
Yes, indeed. From the beginning of this war, Turkey refrained from condemning Hamas. Actually, what I understand is that Turkish government sees Hamas as an important asset in order to penetrate into the Middle East. And therefore, in the very first week, they were more cautious in their statements. As you know, that recently there was a new normalization process between Israel and Turkey. Even the President Erdogan and Prime Minister Netanyahu, they met at the outskirts of the UN. But when Israel began to take action, we began to see a very pro-Palestinian narration in the Turkish media that turned into, unfortunately, to a Hamas propaganda, and it is also, unfortunately, including hate speech towards Israel and the Jews, and the reaction of the people who are watching 24 hours and consuming this hatred news from the Turkish news channels. It's not surprising us. So 2 days ago, the Turkish angry mob, they came next to the Israeli consulate in Istanbul and also the Israeli embassy in Ankara. They protested. They even clashed with the Turkish police. They wounded 4 Turkish police, which is another scandal for the Turks. Unfortunately, I do not foresee a bright future for the relations in case that the IDF will launch a ground operation. Most probably the Turkish administration may call their ambassador back to Ankara, and they even may declare our ambassador in Ankara as a persona non grata. So we should be also very cautious about it. But still, I would like to emphasize that I do not think that they will join to the axis of evil. But opening here a parenthesis, which is very interesting. Last week, the U.S. downed a Turkish UAV in northern Syria, and United States President Biden tagged Turkey's actions in Syria as a threat against the American interests. Therefore, the Turks are looking at the these huge ships, the air flight carriers, and they are considering them as an important challenge for their national security. And as a result, nowadays, they are conducting a military drill in Eastern Mediterranean. So it's really unbelievable what is going on here.
And even if Turkey does not join the fight, as you were saying, we see just how this rhetoric is fueling the hatred. We saw on the screen as you were talking, just visuals of those protests, those anti-Israel demonstrations. Now Israel even warning travelers not to go to Turkey because they are at risk for hate crimes potentially.
Yeah, and I cannot blame the Israeli administration for issuing such a warning. 4 out of 4, it means a very tangible threat. I only want to remind you that only last year, when the Iranian cells wanted to kill Israelis only for being Israelis in Turkey, the Israeli administration issued such a warning. It means that this warning is very credible, it's very tangible. In case that an Israeli tourist who has nothing to do with the decisions of the Israeli government would identify himself or herself in the Turkish street, unfortunately he or she may become a victim of a violent attack. So this is unfortunately tangible. And therefore, I call to all Israelis to refrain from traveling to Turkey. For a couple of, until the end of this war. And God willing, afterwards, when everything will be fine once again, I still try to be very optimistic. And then let's visit Turkey once again, because Turkey is a friendly country. At the end of the day, we never fought with Turkey.
Well, and as we're talking about just what we're seeing abroad, we also are seeing a lot of support from our Western allies. Dr. Ismail, I want to come back to you, because not only UK Prime Minister Sunak's visit today, U.S. President Biden's visit yesterday, all clear signs of strength with Israel's Western allies. But is it mainly optics, in your opinion? Or if push comes to shove and some of these other groups, as you were saying, some of these major threats do get involved, will any of them actually have boots on the ground? That's the real question people are asking.
I want to say 2 things. First of all, it reminds me of I'm old enough to remember the days of the first Gulf War. And I remember there was also an outpouring of support to Israel after the first Scud missiles landed here. And somebody said, and might have been Shimon Peres, one of the big politicians said, you have to know something. If the whole world likes you, then you're in trouble. And that's a sign. I think that this outpouring of love and support is actually, it tells us that we are, in terms of boots on the ground, look, Israel has, like the president said, Israel has a fine fighting force. We already have something between 3 to 500,000 soldiers on the ground, Israeli soldiers who know what to do. In terms of manpower, Israel has the manpower. The issues that we know that exist have been talked about a lot. We all have heard the lectures by General Brick that has warned us from the problems that we have in terms of equipment and command structures and training and so on. However, the manpower is there. What we need to do is now make sure that it has all the equipment. The dudes that are out there, I see them. I mean, I see if they are ready. They just need all the equipment. They have most of it. They need clear orders. Now that's the responsibility of the government. And in 2006, it was a mess. Like every few hours, they changed the mission and the orders. So they need the leadership to get its act together.
And that's something certainly will. And
give clear strategy, clear tactical orders, and let the boys do the job, and the girls, of course, do the job, and something of get out of the way kind of situation. I think that's an interesting point, and there is manpower. Yes, there is a lot of morale.
Troops on the ground, we're seeing them preparing.
Yes,
so now it's up to
the numbers are there.
Seeing exactly what's going to happen. I want to continue to just talk about exactly what we have seen from the troops that have been on the ground so far. Scenes of devastation. We actually have someone who's been in the hospitals right now, looking at those scenes of devastation. I mean, hospitals around the country continue to treat hundreds of patients. More than 4,000 total have been injured since the start of this war, the death toll climbing over 1,400. Right now, joining me via Zoom, I'm joined with Dr. Deborah Gershov-West, the director of the emergency department at Samson Asuda University Hospital in Ashdod. Dr. Deborah, thank you so much for joining us. The scenes and the horror stories that we've heard come out of these hospitals, doctors, nurses, volunteers, all working around the clock. Give us a feel of what it's like in the hospital system in Israel right now.
So at the moment, there's actually the quiet before the storm. At the moment, most of the seriously wounded came in with the first few days, and they're now being treated on the wards. It was the first few days that were really, really hectic, and now we're just getting ready and preparing ourselves for the next wave. We saw very seriously wounded patients. These were all high-energy injuries, gunshot wounds and blast wounds and a lot of shrapnel wounds. The patients came in huge waves, in huge numbers at the same time, and each one of them was in a life-threatening situation that if they had waited another half an hour, another 45 minutes, and then they wouldn't have made it. Alongside their horrific injuries was their horrific stories. And what was something that we've never seen before was that the patients came in, especially the soldiers and the security forces, they weren't worried about themselves. Like normally they say, oh, thank God I'm here and I'm being looked after, if they could awake enough to talk, or you see the relief that they're in good hands. But in this situation, they were just desperate to get back. They were like, leave me, I want to get back. I want to go back to the field. I think all my friends are dead. Everybody around me was dead. And so they came along with the physical trauma. They came with this horrific emotional trauma from the sites that they had witnessed and been part of.
Well, and it's truly heartbreaking to hear these stories, everything that's happening, treating soldiers. But on the other hand, we're hearing specifically Ichilov Hospital in Tel Aviv under fire for treating terrorists, Hamas terrorists. Now, I can imagine how a doctor makes that decision. On the one hand, you have the duty to save lives, but to save the life of a terrorist who brutally murdered, raped, kidnapped your own people. What is this decision that doctors are grappling with?
Up until 10 days ago, I would have quoted to you the Hippocratic Oath, and I would have said to you, we're doctors and we treat everybody. And I can still quote to you the Hippocratic Oath, but I can tell you on national television, international television, that I don't want to treat the terrorists from Hamas. The terrorists from Hamas, I'm not talking about Arabs, I'm talking about the terrorists from Hamas, who, as you said, brutally murdered and mutilated men, women and children in their houses. We have actually been given not an order, but a recommendation, maybe even stronger than a recommendation from the Health Ministry, that we don't have to treat the terrorists. it's a real dilemma. And as I said, we've never had that before. Never, ever. I've been a doctor for over 30 years, and if you ever ask me, I would say I'm a doctor. I will treat the patients and I will treat the terrorists, but we have never found ourselves in a situation of such atrocities and such bestiality that we've seen now with the Hamas. And no, I'll be very clear. I'm not going to treat a terrorist. We're not going to treat terrorists in our hospital.
Well, and it's certainly posing an emotional toll. I can hear just from your voice. There's an emotional toll on the families of all of the staff, treating friends who their loved ones impacted, loved ones murdered. All of you continuing to give the best care while rockets also fly overhead. How is that impacting the doctors and the nurses that you're working with?
So we're fighting, we're working under fire, we're under missile attack, but that's not new for us, unfortunately. Where we are, we're 25 kilometres from the northern border of Gaza. So this is at least the 6th or 7th time we've been under missile attack. So unfortunately, we're used to that. But just think what it means. It means we're under attack, we're being fired at. We know that our family members are now inside their sealed rooms and they're being fired at. We don't know if they're safe. Many of our staff lives down south in the kibbutzim and in the moshavim that are around Gaza. We had a doctor who 24 hours was trapped in a sealed room with her 1.5-year-old daughter while her husband was going around to the neighbouring houses trying to save people who were being injured. Her husband's a paramedic and she's a doctor. We've had a lot of our staff is now living in hotels because their houses from the Yishuvim or from the Sterot, and their houses have been destroyed or it's unsafe to go back. Every single member of the staff knows somebody, if it's a close friend or a family member, who's been brutally murdered. And along with this emotional turmoil, we just have to get through the next hour and the next hour, and have a constant vigilance. So as I said before, you asked how it is now. The wounded that happened, most of it happened in the first day, in the first 24, 36 hours. So now the wounded are in the wards, and the emergency departments throughout the country are quite quiet because people are staying at home. The whole country is shut down. But we are absolutely feeling like it's a calm before the storm. We are preparing ourselves constantly. We're training ourselves up. We're learning from the injuries that we saw before.
Gershov West, we know that you'll continue to give the best treatment, especially, as you said, as Israel possibly prepares for more on all the other fronts. Thank you. We're going out for a quick break here on Zoom In.
Israel is officially in a state of war.
This is a very active scene, and we need to get in the car as we're talking.
More than 100 soldiers and civilians have been kidnapped.
Help us, we don't know what to do.
We just don't know anything.
Entire families, including babies and children and elderly, were butchered in their beds.
Awaken the giant, and we are ready and we are strong.
Everyone is showing up. This is the unity.
This particular project, with a gross capacity of 103.5 megawatt, will be producing around 230 gigawatt hour of clean renewable energy per year.
Salido aquí donde nos ven para clamar por la lluvia. Si en verdad en estos momentos el calentamiento global está afectando a Bolivia, y no solo a Bolivia, sino a todo el mundo entero, y nosotros necesitamos lluvia para los sembradíos.
The Quito Reserve we have the right ingredients and we have to do the job. And that if we have the right ingredients and we do the job, that the vaquita can be protected.
Welcome back to this breaking edition of Zoom In. I want to remind everyone my guests in studio right now are Dr. Fadi Ismail, former senior staffer for U.S. Congress and research fellow at the International Institute for Counterterrorism, along with Dr. Eytan Cohen Yanarocak, Turkey expert for the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security. Thank you both for joining me. Dr. Ismail, let's begin with you. It's been nearly 2 weeks now, and everything we continue to hear, Israel is going to launch a ground operation. It's going to happen. They're going to completely rechange the way that the Gaza Strip looks. Hamas, they say, will no longer exist. What happens once that's done? What is the landscape going to happen the day that Hamas no longer exists and this ground operation is complete?
Wow, well, that's a leap. Once it's done, wait a minute, this once it's done by itself is a process. And I don't think it's going to be that smooth or easy. I mean, I don't think so. The fact is, let's just ponder the thought that they are still shooting missiles after all of this, shelling, all this systematic destruction of the centers of command and so on. They're still shooting back. They're still launching missiles and salvos of them. Not like once in 10 hours.
Even after the IDF in the past 24 hours has targeted hundreds of their sites, they still have
going
more
on.
rockets.
So in other words, they're so well prepared. It means that it's all underground. It is so they had years to fortify and don't forget they had a strong country as a mentor and as a sponsor, which is Iran and Turkey, by the way, to some extent. But mainly Iran, and they have built a whole something there, and we don't know everything about what's happening under the surface there. And the fact that they are able, like almost a week and a half now, 2 weeks almost after that, and they're still sending salvos into and accurate ones, and they don't have accurate missiles. It's like ballistic missiles without yet, but they don't.
And I want to just stop you for a minute as we're getting a red alert that there's incoming rockets towards Tel Aviv right now, actually. Most of our people are heading out of the studio right now. So if you guys want to come to a safe place, we're going off air. Welcome back to Zoom In. We were momentarily interrupted as sirens blared through central Israel here in Tel Aviv. Rockets once again being fired from the Gaza Strip towards Israel. All of us here at the i24News studio rushing towards our shelter as well. I'm joined by my guests once again, Dr. Fadi Ismail, as well as Dr. Eytan Cohen, Yanarocak. Dr. Ismail, 2 weeks later, long-range rockets continue to be fired from the Gaza Strip, targeting central Israel. Now, in Gaza, they are out of food. They are out of water. They still have long-range rockets. How is this happening?
They do have food and do have water because they're prepared. The VAs for preparedness. The people, let me rephrase it. The people who are shooting the missiles have water and food and electricity and internet connection and everything that they need to do that. They have prepared for a long time. I remind you, the last war, it was almost a month, and they were still shooting to the last minute. Because once you have stuff hidden under the surface, it is very hard to reach. And if they have them already prepared there on platforms that just open and shoot and close again, it's very hard to reach. Even if you hit it later, it's already covered. So it's like a cat and mouse game, and I think that they said it. They prefer. Look. This is part of the reason why IDF is not rushing to go in, because there's any number of traps that have been prepared, and I would expect them to. And they said it. They're not hiding it. We are ready for you. This is a kind of warfare that there are units in IDF that have been preparing for and training on. And I think that what they're trying to do, if I try to read what the generals are doing, is to maximize the effect of the softening phase with all these strikes that will soften the resistance as much as possible. I assume this is what they're doing. The fact that they're still able to launch these kinds of attacks tells a lot. Just as the IDF has prepared more in some aspects, they haven't been sitting on their hands. And I'm always on the side of respecting what the other side can do so that you can be ready for it. I don't buy at all I don't like the arrogance. I don't like smugness. And I think that responsible work has to be done with respect to the possible the abilities of the other side. This is probably why IDF is being very mindful and deliberate on how it's preparing its operations. Also, once you're sucked into Gaza, it takes away from your abilities to respond in other frontiers and to remind everybody. We've just talked about what is waiting on the other side, in the north, and
in the north right now, we're also seeing rocket alerts, might I add. It's not only here in central Israel, we're seeing them being fired from our northern front as well. So far, and the IDF is responding there. So now it's a game, like it usually is who's going to make the big mistake first. And actually, the first few days of the war, when the main combat was taking place in the western part of the Negev, that we call Otef Aza, and people will say, well, we should just go in. I said, oh, wait a minute. Now you're fighting in your own terms, in a territory, in a terrain that you know. Let them come out, more of them, so we can catch them on your own terrain. And that's actually worked out, because imagine having to conduct these operations inside Gaza. And by the way, only a couple of hours ago, they caught another one that was, so we're not completely clean yet. No. There's another thing that I'm thinking about, sleeper cells. This is something that's been bothering me for years. There's more than one mechanism by which either Iran or others could have, and I assume they have, implanted sleeper cells inside that are just waiting. So I do think that, I imagine, I guess, I venture to say that the people in charge are looking at all of that, and they don't want to. They don't want to be the ones who make the next big mistake. And as long as you're fighting on your own terms, setting your own clock as much as you can, and fighting in the terrain that you can control the best of your abilities, tactically, it's a very good decision. There's a strategic dimension to that, a diplomatic one, which means the clock is also working diplomatically. Well, and speaking of diplomatically, also, I just want to reiterate how we continue to see these Western allies standing with Israel, more of them coming here as At any moment, there can be rockets fired towards central Israel. It's 2:30 in the afternoon here, Israel time, yet residents, all just like us, running towards their bomb shelter, all as these major leaders are here in Israel, including the UK Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. They're completely uprooting life here. But I think it does show just the reshaping of the geopolitical landscape, or at least really painting a clear line between Western allies and who's standing with Israel and Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, Turkey, Arab countries. Dr. Yanarocak, how is this reshaping the political landscape?
This is very complicated. You also mentioned Turkey in this infamous club, and this is very unfortunate because at the end of the day, Turkey is considered as a member of the Western camp. So this is making the things much more complicated. But we should focus on something. The fact that the international leaders, such as President Biden, Prime Minister Sunak, and others, the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, they are all coming here to demonstrate support with the State of Israel. I think this should be highlighted. This is very important for our legitimacy. And Israel should restore its deterrence. I mean, unfortunately, this attack created a very dangerous precedent. The sense of security of the Israeli citizens unfortunately disappeared. And now people are thinking for the future if they are capable of reaching the outskirts of Ashkelon. So maybe in 10 years, or maybe in 5 years, they may reach to Ashdod, to Rishon LeZion, to Tel Aviv. So this threat should be eradicated. Israel should eliminate Hamas. For years we are speaking about the Iranian existential threat, but let us not be naive. This is if Iran is the octopus and the Hamas and the Hezbollah are its arms, so now it is the time to deal with the arms and we have to cut it. Seriously, we should put an end to this rocket attack threats, this infiltration, penetration attacks. This is unthinkable. I mean, I'm looking at my daughter. She is not leaving the bomb shelter. Do you think that it's normal? The fact that we have bomb shelters in our apartments, do you think that it's normal? No, it's not normal. I want her to grow up like I grew up. Okay, so we have to do it for the next generation, because then they will pay the ultimate price. And let me be very clear. If we are not going to do that, I cannot stop her leaving the country. Okay? So if we are calling this country a home, then we should safeguard our home, and it is the time to act.
And there is only one home for the Jewish people,
yes,
one state of Israel.
Definitely, and nowhere else.
Dr. Ismail, thank you so much for your insight on all of this.